right, so we will move on to the copy command. So this is used if you want to specifically copy a file. There are ways to modify this if you want to copy a directory, but if you use just CP without a flag, you will be only able to copy a file. So the syntax for this is CP, and then everything in those brackets there represents the file that you want to copy. And then this section represents where you want to copy it to. So you don't actually need these little brackets here. This is just representing the syntax there. So for example, if at the command prompt you entered CP space test_file space ... this would have the effect of copying this test file, whatever this test file is, up one directory. So you have the command CP, what you want to copy, and then where you want to copy it to. If you were to replace these two dots with another name, so if you wanted to do CP test file space file 2, it would have the effect of copying test file to file 2. So you'd have two files that are named differently. And then if you needed to, you could modify one or the other and still have your backup copy. So that's another way that this command could be used. If you want to copy a directory instead of a file, you would add the R flag, and this has the effect of copying it recursively. So you want to copy the directory and everything within the directory as well. So the syntax is the same as for just the CP command. So, so you'd just add the R if this were a directory instead of a file. It is good to keep in mind that both the CP command and the move command, or MV, these will overwrite any existing files that you have that are named the same. It won't warn you in most cases, and so you just need to know where, what you're copying or moving and where you're copying or moving them to, and just be sure that you don't overwrite files that are already there. Okay. Any questions about the copy commands? All right, move on to making a new directory. So the command for this is mkdir. Fortunately, it looks very much like make directory. So this will have the effect of making a new directory using the name that you specify. So for example, mkdir tbi_data will create a new directory with the name of TBI data. There's also a manual, and it's good to be aware of this. So if you want more information about any of these commands, it's a good idea to check the manual for this. So to open the manual, the command is man, and then space, and then the command that you want more information on. So for example, if you want more information on the ls command, it'd just be man space ls, and it will bring up this whole manual with additional flags that you can use to modify your commands. So for example, if we were to try this out on my computer, man ls, and it looks a little bit different from what's shown on the screen there, but it does describe the command and then the different options for flags that you can use and the effect of using them. So there's that one flag to have the output be one entry per line. So it looks like a column. Or the A flag, if you want to show hidden files that begin with a dot before their name and so forth. So there are several different ways to modify each of these commands that we're going over. There's the list in long format with the -L and so forth. And then if you want to quit the manual, you can do that by just hitting Q to quit, and it will take you back to your terminal window. All right, RM, this is a command, okay, remove. This is a command that you want to be very careful with, especially as you're starting out. RM removes a file. So if you wanted to now remove that test file that you created, the command would be rm space test file, and that will remove the file. To remove a directory, similar to the copy command, you do add the R flag, and that will have the effect of removing the directory and recursively removing everything within that directory. You do want to be careful with this command because once it's gone, it's gone. You know, with Windows, oftentimes it'll prompt you, it'll ask, do you really want to remove everything on your in your operating system? But with Linux, it will just say, thank you, master, and it will remove it. It will do what you ask it to do. So you do want to be careful when you use that command. Okay. Another good command to know is exit. So this has the effect of closing a terminal on your console. This is the preferred method so that programs won't be left running in the background. And so at the command prompt, you just type exit and it will exit the terminal. I know it's hard to believe, but sometimes after a long day of using Linux, you might want to go home or you might need to close the terminal. And so this is a good one to know for that. Rare occasions, I know, but good to have in mind. So just to show that real quick, at the command prompt, you just type exit and then it will complete that process. And you can then use the red button to close that out. Okay, a few wildcard characters to know. The asterisk or the star, this can represent 0 characters or any number of other characters. So for example, if you were to type super and then the asterisk, this could represent supercomputer, supervisor, super user, or it could just be plain super. And so, for example, if you wanted to list everything in a directory that started with super, you could use the super with the asterisk and it will show everything. You do ls space super and then the asterisk and it would show everything in that directory that starts with super. Question mark, this can represent, it can represent 0 or 1 character. I tend not to use this one because it's just easier for me to use the star, but there could be certain circumstances where you just want it to represent 0 or 1 character. And so you'd use the question mark instead of the asterisk. And again, be careful when you're using these wildcard characters, especially with the RM command. You don't want to remove everything within your file structure without meaning to. So, yep, just a word of caution there. Okay, a couple shortcuts. And these are some features that I really appreciate when working at the command line. Kind of wish there was a way to transfer some of these things to a Windows environment. The tab key. So you may like to really type a lot, but not all Linux users do. So the tab key can be used to autocomplete when you've entered enough characters so that it's able to figure out uniquely which file or directory you intend to use. So actually, let's just show an example here. So if I wanted to go into the subjects directory, so CD space, I could just hit S and it would, and then tab, and it would automatically complete that for me. So if I, yeah. And so then I could go into that subjects directory. If I don't have any that have, okay. So if I guess that one is a file and one is a directory, so I knew which one to go to choose. If you have several that start with a similar name, you might have to give it a little bit more information than just the first letter so that it can uniquely identify where you want to go in that case. So we have our tab key to autocomplete your typing. You can also use the up arrow. So this will pull up the last command that you entered. If you type the up arrow again, it will do the last command before that. And so if you know that you had a very long command that you entered 5 commands previously, you could enter the up arrow 5 times and bring up that really long command. And so again, it can save you from typing. So just to show this, you can't see me doing this, but I am typing the up arrow. So the last command I entered before was ls, so it'll show that. The one before that was cd tutorial data, and so forth. You can just keep entering the up arrow and it will pull up the previous commands. Sometimes it's just easier to enter those commands yourself anew, but if you have a really long command, that can be helpful to use that shortcut. And then to copy and paste, all you have to do is highlight the text that you want to copy and then use the middle mouse button to paste it to whatever location you want it to go. So for example, if you have a really long path that you want to change to this directory in a different terminal, you can use PWD, get that full path, highlight it, and then use it to paste it into the different terminal. So that can be another nice feature there. A couple other good things to know. We talked earlier about how you can only change into a subdirectory that you can see when you type ls on the command prompt. So otherwise, you need to know either your absolute path or your relative path to where that directory is that you want to go to. You could also just go one directory at a time. So if you know that you need to go up 2 directories, and then into a different directory and down to another directory, you could do that one step at a time. Or, as shown in the second example, the relative path would be to, CD up one directory, up one more directory, then go down into this child TBI directory, and then go into the raw directory from there. That would be an example of a relative path from where you're starting from. You could also just type in the full absolute path if you happen to know that. So if you knew that you wanted to get into this TBI directory, and you just happen to know the full path, you could enter that in to go directly there from wherever you're starting from. Okay. I'll briefly introduce VI. Keep in mind that this is one of many available text editors for Linux, and it does tend to be distributed widely. But it's not the easiest to use. There have been some more recent improvements, but even so, sometimes it's referred to as the center of all evil. And then there are some other text editors that you might use instead. Text editor, if you're using FreeSurfer, this can be helpful to check the status of jobs that are running. You can review the recon all log for problems. You can create files or scripts, and you can also create a qdec.dat file if you're still using qdec. To read a text file that's already been created, or if you want to create a new one, you just type VI and then the name of that file. So as shown here, and it will open up this. In this case, this is a new file. And then there are two modes in VI. So there's input mode and there's command mode. And you need to keep in mind which mode you're working in. If you try to input text and you're in command mode, or if you try to execute commands and you're in input mode, that can be pretty frustrating. So just know which mode you're working from. Once you open a file, in order to enter text, you need to switch to input mode by typing I for input, and then enter whatever text you want in the file. If you want to remove the text, depending on how it's set up, you might just be able to delete, or you might need to return to command mode by pressing escape. So in insert mode, you can type whatever you want to type. And then in command mode, there are several different commands that you can use there. As I mentioned, I to switch to input mode, X if you want to delete one character at a time, R to replace a character at a time, U to quickly undo whatever last change you made, DD to delete a line where the cursor is located. If you want to save that file, it's 2 capital Z's or Shift CZ. And if you want to quit without saving, you have that colon Q exclamation mark. And then there are ways to substitute in this, but it's not as easy as some other programs. So just some commands there for VI. I know that was a really quick overview, but there may be other types of text files that you use that are easier to use at text editors, I mean. And then just a few potentially helpful hints for Linux. Do try to avoid spaces in file and directory names. Sometimes it may be able to figure out what you mean, but sometimes you might actually create, for example, 2 directories with the first part and one with the second part. So just it's probably good to get in the habit of using underscores instead of spaces. We talked about always knowing where you're working, what are the contents in the space that you're working. We talked about being careful with the copy command, the remove command, the move commands. Again, it doesn't prompt you to be sure you really want to do what you just asked it to do. It just does what you ask it to do, not necessarily what you want. So be careful with what you're asking for there. And again, be careful with the wildcard characters, especially if you're trying to remove things. You don't want to remove everything most likely. Do use the man command to find out more about the different commands and how to modify them. And it's also a good idea to get in the habit of creating README files in the directories, describing what are the contents of that directory, what was done to them, when and why. That can be a good way to just create a record of the work that you've done there. Okay, we do have a quiz, but before we do that, what questions do you have from this kind of whirlwind tour of Linux? Okay, no questions. All right. Okay, so here's your quiz. It's just a matching one. So what does the ls command stand for or do? This part will require some participation. So please.
List stuff.
List stuff. Yay. Thank you, Hannah. All right. What about the man command?
Manual.
Yay. Manual. Yes. PWD.
Print working directory or.
Great. Yeah. Yes. Print or present working directory. Great. RM.
Remove, which you should never do.
Right. Exactly. Especially not at first. Yep. Very careful with the remove command. CP.
Copy.
Copy. Yay. CD.
Change directory.
Change directory. VI.
Text editor.
The text editor. And last but not least, the asterisk.
Wildcard.
Wildcard is an Elisa wildcard, right? Okay, great. Oh, you guys did an excellent job on that. All right, so there are some more Linux commands. And so these next slides just have some of them. The ones in red are the ones that you might use more often than others. We did talk about CD. If you're working on a remote computer, you might have to specify if you want the local computer or the remote computer that you're wanting to change directories in. We went over the copy command and the exit command. A lot of other commands there. List stuff we went over. Make directory, remove. Anyway, and there's a lot more that aren't shown here, but hopefully this gives you at least an introduction to some of these many commands. There is a who am I command, in case you forget who you are. Actually, it just it lets you know who you are logged in as, and you really should be logged in as yourself.
It's helpful if you've switched to root recently and you need to make sure that you've switched back.
Yes, that is a good example of when you might need to use that. Yes, because you don't want to be doing all things in root. That could be dangerous as well. Yep. All right, so there are some other tutorials out there. These are just some examples, but there are a lot of others online. There's also a Linux emulator, and I haven't tried this recently, but there are some emulators that even on a Windows machine, you can make it look like a Linux terminal. So you can practice some of these commands if you weren't able to, or if you didn't have a Mac computer to pull up a terminal to use for this. So, and that brings us to the end. So